A coroner's jury attributed Harry Boland's death to shock and hemorrhage resultant upon a gunshot wound. Erskine Childers has said of Harry's death that big-hearted Harry Boland, gallant, generous, dauntless, has followed his friend and comrade Cathal. Constance de Markovich was reported to have heard Harry say on the 17th of July that he expected that Mick will get me plugged. I know too much about him. She has also said there was no more loyal or faithful comrade than Harry Boland. Sean Nunan has said of Harry, he died as he lived, good and clear and straight, and true to his principles. Michael Collins has said, I only thought of him with the friendship of the days of 1918 and 1919. I'd send the wreath, but I suppose they'd return it torn up. Kitty Kiernan has said of Harry, I'll always believe in his genuineness, that I was the one and only. Eamon de Valera has said, when my time comes, Harry, more than all others, I want to meet you. Kate Boland, Harry's mother, has said, he was everything to me. Jerry Boland, Harry's brother, said, I don't bear up too well myself. Sometimes I think my heart will burst.
My name is Bróna Uí Loing. I was born Bróna Boland, so I would be a granddaughter of Jerry Boland, who was fought in 1916 in Jacobs and then became a government minister. His brother Harry Boland fought in the Metropole Hotel and ended up in the GPO, and their other brother Edmund fought in the Imperial Hotel, and then their sister Kathleen, she was a great woman, just to be on a level with the three brothers. She was just as good as them.
Okay.
This is Granda, Harry, Kathleen, Ned and Ellen, who died. It goes back to 1840 in Manchester, where the first Pat Boland married Eliza Kelly.
Harry's grandfather, Patrick Boland, married Eliza Kelly in St Chad's, Manchester in April 1845. Eliza Kelly was a first cousin of Colonel Thomas J. Kelly, co-founder of the IRB and US Civil War veteran. Eliza's 15-year-old son, James, was a scout in a daring raid on a police van in 1867, which was carrying Colonel Kelly and DC on the way to Bellevue Jail on Hyde Road, Gorton.
But suffice to say that when Colonel Kelly and DC were captured in Manchester as vagrants, this man who had all these medals from the American Civil War, young James, who was Pat and Eliza's son, my great-granddad, kept watch and warned the Fenians in Manchester when they were coming through, and they rescued DC and Colonel Kelly, and that was the involvement way back in the 1840s, 1850s, 1860s.
The two men escaped and were smuggled back to the USA. As a result, the Manchester martyrs were executed.
James then came and married Catherine Woods, came to Ireland.
Her ancestor, Philip Woods, was a blacksmith who was dragged at the back of a cart and whipped through the streets of Carlingford, County Louth, for making pikes for rebels in the 1798 Rising. A warrant was issued on 25th of June 1883 for James's arrest as a dangerous Fenian. He and Kate fled to America. James was a great friend of O'Donovan Rossa, who inscribed in his book, "To my dear friend James Boland, who reminds me of men of my own time." He and 7 colleagues headed a contingent at Parnell's funeral in 1891, wielding a caman or a hurley, draped in black, at the head of 2,000 mourners. He was elected president of the Dublin Central Committee of the GAA in 1892.
He was a paviour in Manchester, and he became an overseer manager for Dublin Corporation in doing the cobblestones in Smithfield, and I hope in Moore Street, probably the same. But he was clubbed twice on the head, and from his injuries the second time at a Parnellite meeting, he died in hospital. So his widow, thanks to the Republican Brotherhood who educated them in the O'Brien Institute, they all became members of Conor na Gaeilge, members of the IRB, and that's how it all started.
On his own deathbed in 1894, he was refused absolution by Father Evers from Phibsborough Church when he admitted to being a Fenian. He replied, "I won't die with a lie in my mouth, so I must go to God as I am." The Dominican, Father Headley, gave him the last rites. Funds were raised to save his wife and young family from destitution. Kate was given a tobacconist business. What took place in 1916?
Well, in 1916, Granda was part of a battalion, I think it's the 2nd Battalion, and they were up in Crooksling, and then they came down to Dublin City. Harry and Ned also came in. Granda was the only one who survived and never spoke about it.
Gerald Boland remarked, "As we were both IRB men, we knew what was on foot." He distributed arms around the city with Joseph Mary Plunkett on Thursday the 20th of April. Gerald informed Harry of Owen McNeill's countermanding order. "When we were told to go home, but to keep in readiness for a sudden mobilisation, I went to the City Hall and told Harry it was all off." Gerald returned to Crooksling Sanatorium near Brittis, where he had become land steward. When he heard of the rebellion there, he scoured the city in search of B Company, and with other units from the 2nd Battalion went to Jacob's factory.
Granda was in Jacob's, that he was a dab hand at making canister bombs.
Harry was with a unit headed by Vincent Poole of the Irish Citizen Army. Poole was an expert in guerrilla tactics from the Boer War in South Africa. Harry was accompanied by his younger brother Ned. They occupied the Wicklow chemical manure factory. Poole supplied Harry and his companions with gelignite. He told them, "Dig a little hole in the ground under the tracks. Place the gelignite in it, cover it again with soil, light the fuse and clear out." But the job was a failure. Harry Boland, Harry Colley and others abandoned the irascible Poole and went to help Henderson at Fairview Strand in Gilbney's wine depot. Henderson was delighted. The two Harrys were a great help to our men. Kathleen Boland delivered ammunition and provisions and a message from Kate. "Dear Harry, God bless you, you are out to win." On Tuesday, James Conley summoned Harry's section of F Company to the GPO. Harry accompanied Traynor to the Metropole. Captain Poole greeted Harry with a storm of abuse, accusing him of deserting his command in Fairview, even raising the butt of his rifle in the course of the argument. But Oscar Traynor argued that if Harry was present, he could not be a traitor. Traynor declared himself Poole's superior officer in the post and sent Poole upstairs to check for undiscovered guests. A series of zigzag holes were excavated through each of the houses until Manfield's in Abbey Street. A small detachment, Harry, Poole and Tom Leahy, did their best to prevent the British advancing across Lower Abbey Street into Sackville Place. The rifles were so overheated through continuous use that the glowing barrels had to be cooled with oil drained from sardine tins. Rifles were kept loaded for Boland. There was no sleep. The house was burning fiercely. Harry realised that another hour would be as long as they could stay there. The heat was terrific. The building was in danger of collapse. Orders came to evacuate and retire to the GPO at once. Traynor and Harry were the tail of the bedraggled party which dashed across Princes Street to the GPO. It was largely deserted. Harry spent his last moments in the GPO helping Dermot Lynch dismantle the remaining bombs and explosions. In Henry Place, Clark ordered Traynor, Poole and Harry to break into a shop in nearby Moore Street. Their task was to hack out a tunnel from house to house until every intervening wall had been smashed between Henry Place and Parnell Street, once Great Britain Street. Tom Lee recalled the cheerfulness of Harry, who went until his hands were bleeding from blisters from using the heavy hammer and tools. When not hammering, Harry was behind the diversionary barricade at the corner of Moore Street and Henry Place, according to Frank Henderson. He showed amazing courage. He fired away by himself for a long time. Traynor recalls, Harry and I volunteered for a bayonet charge to take the barricade at the end of the street and, having done so, force our way on towards Williams and Woods, keeping the route open as we went along. I can remember saying to Harry, "Well, this looks like the end for us." His reply was typical of Harry. "The only thing that is wrong about this order is that it should have been given long ago." Each man was given a portion of pear. But there were two further orders. One, to abandon the bayonet charge and rest. And then, when they awoke, to surrender. Ned Boland. Ned recently worked his way home from Rio de Janeiro as a British merchant seaman. He accompanied Harry to the Wicklow chemical manure factory. Later, he reinforced the trigger-happy garrison at the Imperial. When that was abandoned, he then fought for several hours in Cathedral Street. He deposited his guns with a considerate priest in the vaults of the pro-cathedral. When the British officers came to his home to cross-examine him, he had a week's beard on him and smelled of gunpowder. But he said he had been at ferry house races and had been unable to return home before. He was not arrested. Kathleen Boland, Witness Statement 586. After giving up occupation of Gilby's on Tuesday, Harry, who had taken prisoner a soldier called Henry, who had been an instructor at the British camp at the Bull Wall, brought him with him in a cab to the GPO, where he was held a prisoner until the evacuation of the building. After the rising, when Harry was being picked out by the detectives, this soldier was brought along to spot if he could recognise any of the volunteers. He picked out Harry, saying, "He who laughs last, laughs best." Harry replied, "Yes, chum, I am laughing. I am not whinging as you were when I took you prisoner." "'Tis not bars that make the prison." Harry treated imprisonment as a challenge to his physical and mental prowess. In a letter to Bill Duggan, he wrote that prison life was dull, drab and monotonous, yet it has its compensations and can be made cheerful. It's all a question of temperament. In Richmond Barracks, his cellmates selected Harry. He was regarded as good-humoured and kindly, and at the same time was a rock of sense and shrewdness. On the 9th of May, Harry was sentenced to 10 years penal servitude for taking part in armed rebellion and waging war against His Majesty the King. He was visited by his mother Kate in Mountjoy Prison. She exclaimed, "Wasn't it an extraordinary thing to arrest you, and you only coming from the races?" Harry replied, "Ah, no, mother. I was not coming from the races. I went out to strike a blow against the bloody British Empire." He was confined to the grim confines of Dartmoor Prison under Major T.R. Reid, who was governor. He treated the rebels as mere convicts. Kathleen Boland recalled, Harry spent most of his time in the punishment cells. He was so light-hearted he could not obey the rigid rules of silence. Ned visited Harry in Dartmoor and wrote, "I won't try to tell you how tough it was for me to leave you behind on that day I was with you. Those 40 minutes went by like seconds. We had so much to say to each other." Harry responded, "Your visit acted as a rare tonic to me." On the 14th of December, Harry wrote, "Here I am in Lewes jail, alive and kicking." When the warders indulged in impudent talk, Harry smashed one of them on the head with his handcuffs and kneed the other. The governor told him, "We've tamed tougher than you." Harry replied, "By Christ, you'll never tame me." Harry became leader of the cleaning squad, stealing the chaplain's newspaper, handing out loaves, for which he was confined to a punishment cell. Harry's breaches of discipline were to secure recognition of the convicts as prisoners of war. On being dispatched to Maidstone, he resisted violently, as Inspector Wynne reports. On being handcuffed, he had to be carried to the car, glorying in the fact that it took 3 men to carry him. He threw a piece of lavatory paper from the motor car on his way. It was addressed, "Friend, send this note to Mrs. Boland, 15 Marino Crescent, Dublin." It was picked up by a mother who had 2 sons doing their bit, and it was forwarded to Kate. His explosive account of the prisoners as innocent victims of arbitrary power was taken by Kathleen to the Irish National Aid Office in Exchequer Street, and was examined by Michael Collins. Collins was adept at converting prisoners' grievances into emotive political issues. Eventually, the king declared a pardon and remit of the rest of their sentences. Harry and his companions sailed for Dublin. "We are going to have a picnic on our release in return for all the prayers. I won't be the poor lone boy next time." On the 17th of June 1917, Harry came home.
After 1916, Granda was arrested. Anyway, that was the first thing. And I know, as I said, he went to Belfast and he went to Frongok. And I think it was about 6 or 7 years, because I remember my grandma telling me about my dad. By the time Granda came home, Daddy was born in 1916. Daddy would have been 6 or 7, and he really didn't like this man with the beard who suddenly came into his house, because he had been the man of the house. Okay. And he didn't know who this strange man with the beard was who came in. And of course, it was Granda. And when Granda eventually came from prison, he fought and won the seat in Roscommon, where his brother Harry had had a seat.
Kathleen Boland, Witness Statement 586. The rescue of De Valera from Lincoln Jail. Mick and Harry went to Manchester and stayed with our aunt. They obtained a fur-lined coat from the Fenian Seamus Barrett, who owned a second-hand clothing shop for De Valera. My brother Jerry made keys to the pattern of one that was sent out on a Christmas card from Lincoln Jail. He made one from one of the blocks, gave it to Harry, and then sent the 2 other blocks to the prison in a Christmas cake, which was made by Mrs. Sean McGarry, and a file. De Lochry, Mayor of Kilkenny, who was a locksmith and a prisoner in Lincoln, made the key which enabled De Valera to escape. Harry's key hadn't worked. When De Valera came home, he handed the key to my mother, saying, "Take great care of this. When we get the Republic, it will be gilded and placed in the museum." It is now in the museum. Kathleen Boland, 586. The shop in 64 Middle Abbey Street. We always had a store of rifles in a recess behind the wooden partition of the fitting room in Abbey Street. In the basement, we had a big store of homemade Mills bombs. They had the shape of electric light bulbs, and the boys used to call them the eggs. It was I who handed out the guns to these messengers when they came. We had a manager whom we did not trust. but I managed to terrorise him into silence. And as he was a great coward, he never said anything.
Collins and Boland both stayed in Granard often, and even came to stay at the Kiernan's lakeside home. Kitty had continued her relationship with Harry Boland, and he was going to ask her to marry him when De Valera asked him to accompany him to America in June 1919. Boland returned to Ireland in May 1920 and immediately went to Granard. He proposed to her later that year and asked her to honeymoon in America. Kitty put him off though, knowing that she did not want to marry him. By then her affections were split between Boland and Collins. On the day he left for America, Harry wrote to her telling her that he had spent the night before with Collins. As I had to catch the 7:35 a.m. train, I bade him goodbye, only to find him at Kingsbridge as fresh as a daisy to see me off. I need not say to you how much I love him, and I know he has a warm spot in his heart for me, and I feel sure no matter what matter our triangle may work out, he and I shall always be friends. But it was not to be. On Harry's return from the States to take part in the treaty debate, he wrote, "Kitty, I want to congratulate you. M told me of your engagement, and I wish you long life and happiness. Ever yours, H. Boland."
I have letters of Harry's. I haven't read them because they're actually too personal, too sad, but I read one and it was just 2 lines and it said, "Please write back to me, Kitty, if only to tell me to go to hell." And I thought that was the saddest thing I ever read in my life, and I never read any more.
On 6th of April 1919 in Croke Park, Tipperary played Wexford in Gaelic football to raise money for the Irish National Aid and Volunteers Dependence Fund. Collins and De Valera threw in the ball and Harry Boland was the referee. When Harry Boland had left for America, Hannah Sheehy Skeffington replaced him as the Sinn Féin national chairman. Collins was appalled, not only because she was a woman but also because she was more moderate than Boland.
Kathleen Boland, witness statement 586. Off to America. May 1919, Harry went to Manchester and succeeded in getting a job as a stoker on a boat. When he arrived safely in America on the 8th of June, he was met by Jim McGee and Jim Gleeson, who saw him safely through the customs. He was carrying, in one of his specially made seaman's boots, the text of Ireland's claim to independence. Both the boot and the text were afterwards given to the National Museum by Joe McGarrity. He had been sent to America to start a publicity campaign for the Dáil loan and to blaze the trail for De Valera.
He was introduced to the well-known Fenian John Devoy and Daniel Francis Coholan, a New York Supreme Judge. John Devoy wrote, "Mr. Boland is a splendid type of the new generation of Irish nationalists. He inherits his fighting qualities. His father was a Fenian, well known to the editor of this paper. He brought up his son in the fighting spirit of Fenianism. However, Coholan was different. At a large meeting he asked Harry from which university had he graduated. Harry, who realised the question was intended to humiliate him, promptly replied, Q90, Dartmoor Prison, for Ireland. The applause was tremendous and Coholan never forgave Harry. Boland's mission in the USA was to prime the existing networks of Irish organisations, secret and open, to mobilise in support of a future public campaign. De Valera arrived in the USA clandestinely. No one knew he was coming. In fact, it was reported that Harry nearly had a fit when he found out De Valera was on board ship. Boland, instead of acting as envoy in his own right, became De Valera's valet, shepherd and manager. On 26th of January, Harry recorded in his diary, very, very busy packing the bags to Washington. Chief is a terrible man for bags, books and notes. Each trip we take, no matter how short the travel, enough books, etc. to fill a room. As usual, nearly missed the train. There was a marked contrast between the two men. De Valera was gauche in manner, convoluted in thought and speech. Harry was smooth-tongued, gregarious and liked by everybody. Coholan and Devoy found De Valera arrogant and pig-headed. They favoured a policy of working for Irish independence as Americans and through the American system. Bond certificates were issued from January 1920. The Wall Street Journal, 4th of February, reported that Irish domestic servants and others of like or lower standards of intelligence subscribed $5,123,640. Boland had appealed for all Irish Americans to contribute 50 cents apiece to the bond drive. Immediately there were shouts of, "We'll contribute more than that." Secretary Boland shouted back at the cheering crowd, "And we'll accept all of it too." Harry relished the buzz of roaring crowds, receptions, motorcades, banquets and balls. He boasted to his mother, "I have developed great power of oratory. I am going on the great tour which opens tomorrow in Philadelphia, and I will have visited every state in the Union ere I return." On the 18th of October, there was a visit to Chippewa Indian Reserve in Wisconsin to express Irish brother fraternity with the other oppressed peoples. Harry wrote, "The Chief De Valera was given the name the Dressing Feather. We had the pleasure of seeing native games and dances. We fed on venison and wild rice." He wrote to his mother, "I never enjoyed a day so much." Harry was a shrewd, effective organiser of propaganda and met many great American men. He recorded in his diary, 24th of February, Tuesday, New York. W. Randolph Hearst agreed to aid us. October. Wonderful interview with Henry Ford, extraordinary man. Boland hoped that we can accomplish much in America, and we can and must fight it out in Ireland, backed up by the public opinion of America. However, in his diary, Boland recollected a record of frustration. 22nd of October, Wednesday, St. Louis. Fear that bond has not been properly organised. 23rd of October, St. Louis. I am ordered back to New York to see to organisation of bonds. 6th of November, Thursday, New York. I am very much upset at present position of bond. No system. 8th November, Saturday, New York. Bonds by day and night. Talk bonds all day. Rave bonds all night. I had better stop. The bond money was deposited in cheques made payable to De Valera. Collins wrote to Boland, "We could do with a great deal more money quickly." Half of the over $5 million was buried throughout the Revolution and the 1920s in various American banks. 22nd of September, Boland wrote to Collins, "The Chief is particularly anxious that you at home safeguard the money. There is roughly speaking $3 million available for dispatch to Ireland. Will you in your next dispatch answer me that you can safeguard the funds?" Due to the stress, Harry suffered breakdowns in health throughout his period as envoy. James O'Mara took control of the bonds. Boland was sent home from America to explain the situation. On 27 of May, Collins and Boland greeted each other cordially. Harry's diary records, 28th of May, arrive home and am warmly greeted. Find Mother, Kathleen and Ned are in grand spirits. I enjoy myself around the old home and feel very happy. In July, after the truce was signed, Collins, not realising his friend had, in America, become a member of the De Valera camp, wrote warning Harry that things had changed for the worse in Dublin. I find myself looking at friends as if they were enemies. I don't care for things as they are now.
Kathleen Boland, Witness Statement 586. A terrible tragedy. While Kevin Barry was in jail awaiting execution, Mick Collins sent word to ask me about Gannon, a friendly warder in Mountjoy who knew the Childers as well. I got in touch with Gannon at his own house in one of the prison cottages and told him that Mick would send letters to me to be transmitted through Gannon into the jail. All arrangements were made for the rescue of Kevin from the jail. The night before the execution, about 10:30, Gannon came up to our house in Marino Crescent in a terrible state. He asked me, in the name of God, what had happened, that the escape had not been effected. I was later told Kevin's mother had objected to the rescue plan being carried out, as she feared it might entail loss of life, and also she fully expected a reprieve would be granted on account of Kevin's youth.
Harry Boland, who was then representing the government in the United States, was in the main responsible for the importation of these Thompson guns.
So these are the kind of guns that would have been possibly in the tunnel underneath here?
This is definitely the type of gun that was used in the tunnel here. This is the M1918 version of the Thompson submachine gun.
Okay.
So these were produced by the Colt company in America, designed by General Thompson, and they were financed by Irish-American money in the States, which was largely collected by the IRB, which was the secret organisation behind the Irish Republican Army.
Following the truce, De Valera and British Prime Minister David Lloyd George engaged in meetings in London to determine how negotiations should proceed. Harry Boland often went on behalf of De Valera to deliver messages to Lloyd George while he was on holiday. The status of a republic previously demanded by De Valera was not acceptable, and instead the purpose of the Irish delegation was to ascertain how the association of Ireland with the community of nations known as the British Empire may best be reconciled with Irish national aspirations. Harry Boland was to go to London as a secretary to the delegation along with Erskine Childers, Dermot O'Hegarty and Fionn Lynch, but De Valera sent him back to the US instead. He told Joe McGrath, "I have a nice job to prepare Irish America for a compromise." He was going back to America on the President's instructions to prepare the American people for something less than a republic.
At one stage, the Boland family, that would be my great-granny, granddad and Auntie Kathleen, were given the Russian state jewels to mind, and they hid them in the chimney in the Crescent in Clontarf, and they were told they weren't to be given back to the Russian nation until Ireland became a republic.
The Russian crown jewels, the Russian-Irish connections. Vladimir Lenin defended the importance of the Easter Rising of 1916, but regretted its timing. It is the misfortune of the Irish that they rose prematurely, before the European revolt of the proletariat had had time to mature. Trotsky saw the Rising as the start of something bigger than Ireland. The historical role of the Irish proletariat is only the beginning. Already it has brought its class anger against militarism and imperialism into its rising, under an out-of-date flag. This anger will not now subside. Harry Boland was appointed ambassador to America and spent long periods there fundraising for the Republic. When the Russian and Irish representatives met in New York in April 1920, they were on similar missions. They were in search of recognition and funding for their new republics. De Valera raised more than $5 million on his US tour accompanied by Harry, but the Russians were less successful. Ludwig Martens, head of the Soviet Bureau in the US, had trouble getting dollar donations. He cut a deal with the Irish. Tiaras, necklaces and other pieces made with gold, pearls and diamonds were offered by him as security on a loan to the Russians from the Irish for $20,000. Harry was charged with returning the Russian Romanov jewels safely to Ireland in 1922. On his return, he met Mick Collins in the Gresham Hotel to hand over the jewels during a recess in the treaty debates. A row erupted between Mick and Harry, which spelt the end of their friendship. Mick took the jewels out of his pocket, threw them at Harry, saying, "Take these back, they're blood-stained." Harry had obtained Mick's receipt for them, placed the jewels in his pocket and walked home in a blazing temper. He instructed Kathleen to keep the jewels until Ireland had obtained its sovereignty, as per the condition of the loan. The jewels were kept in the Boland home at 15 Marino Crescent, which was formerly the home of the author of Dracula, Bram Stoker. During the various raids on their home by Free State soldiers during the Civil War, Mrs. Boland carried the jewels on her person. When the heat died down, the precious jewels were kept in two hiding places: a recess with a sliding door in the hot press, and in a box in a hole in the back of the chimney recess of the range. It was Harry's dying wish that these jewels were to be given to De Valera when he came to power. They were held securely by the Boland family until 1938, when De Valera passed the constitution and recovered the ports. Then, the family considered Harry's wishes were fulfilled and the jewels were handed over. The family received a receipt signed by De Valera, Sean McEntee and Maurice Moynihan. The jewels were kept in government buildings for the next 17 years in the unlocked drawer of James McElliot, Secretary of the Department of Finance. Irish politician Patrick McCartan was secretly sent to Russia in 1921 after the loan was made, with the aim of securing Russian recognition of the Republic of Ireland. However, Mr. Litvinov, Foreign Minister of Russia, intimated that the Anglo-Soviet trade agreement was being negotiated with England, which would make it difficult at that moment for them to do anything for Ireland. 27 years later, McCartan, during the 1948 election, asked, "Where are the jewels?" De Valera stated that the loan had never been repaid. McElligot wanted Christie's to sell them without revealing their history, but negotiations were started in March 1949. The jewels were returned to their homeland in September through the Irish High Commissioner in London for a payment of the original $20,000 loan. The money was lodged to the Irish Exchequer the following year. The jewels are currently on display in the Moscow Kremlin Armory State Diamond Fund. Harry, it has come to this. Of all things, it has come to this. It is in my power to arrest and destroy you. This I cannot do. If you will think over the influence which has dominated you, it should change your ideal. You are walking under false colours. If no word of mine will change your attitude, then you are beyond all hope. My hope. Harry Boland ate in 46 Nassau Street, Jamet's restaurant, with a former secretary of Collins, Anna Fitzsimmons, later Mrs. Kelly. On 30th of July 1922, he told her, "Not to worry, eat well, it may be your last meal with me." Boland was shot the next day.
But Harry was killed in the Civil War in Skerries. In fact, his anniversary came up the 1st of August. He was shot in a hotel in Skerries, which was very sad because he and Michael Collins had been bosom buddies. They were both in love with Kitty Kiernan, but suffice to say they were great friends. They were both in love with Kitty, and then they split apart after the treaty was signed, and Harry went his way, Micheál went the other way. And it is said that Michael Collins, some of Michael Collins' men surprised Harry in a hotel in Skerries and shot him. He was unarmed. So I suppose it was a faction of Harry's, though it's never been proven, shot Michael Collins. But it's such a shame, two strong men gone before their time. They were both, I think, 32 at the time. Awfully sad. Ned died in America. He jumped ship and got some disease which killed him. So there was only Granda left and Auntie Kathleen to carry on of the Boland legacy.
I'm a chap in my mid-30s. One of my first experiences of 1916 would have been the Michael Collins film. But in the Michael Collins film, they famously have changed how Harry Boland died. Would you like to correct that at all? Or?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, he certainly didn't die running down a sewer.
Okay. Why did they do that? Just dramatic license? you think?
Dramatic license. He was in a hotel in Skerries. He was actually, I think, on the run because they were all trying to get him. And he was in a hotel in Skerries for the weekend on the 1st of August, it was 1922. And he was surprised in his bed, unarmed and shot and brought to hospital. And his wounds were so severe he died in hospital. But Granda was not allowed out of prison to visit him while he was in hospital. And that hurt stayed with Granda to his dying day, because he would have liked to have seen his brother. So there was his poor mother, having lost Ned, having lost her husband first at 35, all those years ago in 1895. Now she loses two of her sons, Ned and Harry, and her heart was broken. Really.
As Harry Boland's funeral cortege proceeded up O'Connell Street to Glasnevin Cemetery, a Lancia armoured car containing Free State troops stopped. The troops disembarked, laid down their arms in the street, removed their caps, and stood at attention until the hearse had passed. The government had allowed the funeral to proceed without interruption. Many thought that the armoured car incident was the only way Collins could pay his last respects.
Granda, you see, fought in Jacob's biscuit factory, but unfortunately now, when we went to our first garrison meeting, because all the different garrisons, the descendants of those who fought in the different garrisons are meeting now to commemorate those garrisons in 1916. And it was with great sadness I went to Jacob's, because there is absolutely nothing there of where Granda fought. It is now a DIT. And I find that very sad, because in Moore Street, those buildings have had nothing done to them. So effectively, they are exactly the same as they were in 1916. So they should be preserved. But it's the same with the GPO garrison, because I could go there as well, because Harry and Ned were part of that. But the GPO is unrecognisable from 1916. So I find it very sad, but I cannot retrace their footsteps while they were there, because there's nothing there to see, which I find very sad indeed.
Do you find similarities with Moore Street in terms of how that's happening?
Absolutely. The similarities I find is that Moore Street has to be preserved, because people say to me, but it's rack and ruin. I say, no, they've done nothing with it. So it's exactly the same as it was in 1916. And if we want to see how those 300 men went through from one end to the other, you can still see it. You can still see the room where they sat that night. You can see everything, because nothing has been done to it. Everything I ever wished, all I ever wanted was Granda, Granduncle Harry and Granduncle Ned and Grandauntie Kathleen, who's gone now, to be commemorated, not specially, but among their friends and their comrades who fought and died for our country. When I think about it, like, it was so spectacular, this little group. Now, they were a small group in comparison to the British Army, but they were just foolish, okay, but they were wonderful. They fought and they won our freedom, and that's all I care about. And I think what they did was just fabulous. I'm so proud of them, and I just want them to be commemorated with the respect they deserve, because they have to be respected for what they did. They were wonderful.